Warning: these social media platforms may be hazardous to your health. Censorship kills. Pain coming. This has been a PSA by Breaking Spectre. Good morning, everybody. How we doing? Spectre here for another edition of In Case You Missed It news on this Tuesday, December 21st. Hopefully you guys are doing well. The Christmas season upon us. Hopefully you've gotten all of your shopping done, getting all your stuff in order for potentially any family coming over, wherever you may be headed, celebrate the season. And weather's not looking too bad here in these parts here this morning. We got fairly clear skies, sun's out, can't complain, and hopefully we're on a little bit of a warming trend. But on the broadcast here this morning, we're going to get into some financials, as we typically do. I'll talk about Turkey's lira exploding and what's happened there. Elon Musk paying $11 billion in taxes and is spat with Pocahontas. Talk a little bit about the World Economic Forum and, of course, eating crickets and bugs and things of that nature. Talk about some of the severe weather wrecking top Southeast Asian port here recently. And, of course, we'll get into some of the vaccine-related stuff as well. And, of course, even California rewarding deadbeats with cash because of, well, we'll get into that nonetheless. So, that being said, stick around. We'll be right back. Hey everybody, Spectre here. Just wanted to give a big thank you to all you guys who continue to support my work. Jump in, day out on the streams, support all the various pieces I put out, etc., etc. And in doing so, I figured what the heck, we'll put some merch out there if you guys wish to continue to support and help defray some of the costs of streaming, which many of you guys know many of us incur. Got a handful of shirts and that here. Spectre Does News. We got the Realize, Real Lies shirt and that you hear on my PSA periodically. And of course the No BS insignia from the show I do over on the 5x5 channel, all of which you can get for the low price of $19.99. Aside from that, you can get the Let's Go Brandon #FJB shirt as well in a variety of colors. And I've recently added the hoodies in a variety of colors you can get right there as well. And last but not least, you can grab yourself a No BS shirt and the Zip Up hoodie as well. If you don't want any articles of clothing, well, you can grab yourself a mug or a 20-ounce water tumbler if you wish. Your choice. And of course, as always, just want to thank you, the listeners, the audience, those who are in chat day in, day out. Thank you for your continued support. All right into it we go here this morning. Looking at the old weather map for the US of A. The old radar showing a little bit of some disturbances in the upper portions of the Midwest here this morning, up around Minnesota, Wisconsin area, and it looks like maybe we got a couple scatterings of stuff cruising across the Midwest, Oklahoma, perhaps Kansas, and then of course down around the Southeast. Looks like we got some activity down that way. Precipitation-wise, looks like the majority of this stuff, well, you guys up yonder, up around Minnesota, yeah, you guys are probably getting some snow. As for you guys down in the Southeast, looks like you guys are getting a little bit of rain down there. And temperature-wise, well, not looking too bad. The dip out of Canada seems to be staying at bay up around the border. Can't complain about that. And then, of course, right now, we'll probably see some of the warmer weather tick up here in the southeast and across the lower portions of the south here today. So, can't complain all in all. That being said, getting into it here this morning, the futures and global markets rebound on booster shot of hope. Santa rally may arrive yet. Perhaps catalyzed by Goldman's persistent bullishness. See as market slide. Here is Goldman's bull case, $125 billion in January inflows. Or perhaps it was just a booster shot of optimism that vaccines will keep the Omicron outbreak in check, coupled with hope for a revival of Joe Biden's $2 trillion economic package. See, here is the fallback plan Manchin would support and why Goldman thinks it wouldn't move the needle. Or maybe the Santa rally decided to make a scheduled appearance, which usually begins on December 21st, but on Tuesday, U.S. futures, Asian markets, and European Bourses all rebounded after 3 days of steep selling. E-mini S&P futures were up 1%, up 44.5 points. Nasdaq futures were up 170 points, or 1.09%. Dow futures were up 314 points, or 0.9%, as a recent bout of turbulent moves continues. Europe's eStocks 50 was higher by 1.3% as the mining sector climbed 2.4%. Asia stocks closed higher, bolstered by a rebound in Japan, which is up 2.1%, and a rally in Chinese property developers. 10-year yields rose above 1.45%. The dollar was flat and cryptos jumped, with Bitcoin trading close to 50 grand again and Ether above 4,000. And as is typical, there's our E-mini S&P futures on the day. It says markets have been whipsawed going into the holiday season as investors assess economic risks from the spread of the Omicron virus variant and a hawkish central bank pivot. While sentiment took a hit after Democratic Senator Joe Manchin rejected President Biden's tax and spending package on Sunday, a call between the two has stoked optimism the deal isn't dead, prompting speculation that the Fed may have no choice but to delay its tightening campaign as $1.75 trillion in fiscal stimulus won't be coming. See how that works, folks? All that jawboning by the Fed about, yep, we're going to taper, but it's kind of contingent on whether or not old Biden and the idiots over in Congress get it done, and if they don't, well, I guess that's reason enough for me not to taper at all. So inflation, folks, is probably here to stay for the foreseeable future. Zero Hedge says also collapse of BBB, in effect loss of $1.75 trillion in fiscal stimulus, means the Fed will have to ease monetary stimulus tightening. Expect Fed speakers to address this in coming days. And looking at some of the movers here this morning, says crypto exposed stocks rebound in U.S. pre-market trading on Tuesday as Bitcoin rises amid a volatile period for the digital currency. Marathon Digital and Riot Blockchain rise 5.2% and 4.6% respectively. Renewable stocks and EV makers rise in pre-market trading, set to rebound from the previous session's losses, amid hopes that talks will revive President Biden's economic package. Tesla gains 1.1%, Nikola adds 1.5%. DBV Technologies ADRs fall 16% pre-market after the company informed the U.S. FDA it plans to start a pivotal Phase 3 clinical study for a modified Viaskin peanut patch in children. Kempen says the development is far from favorable, as it means increased clinical risks and investment. Alodira Therapeutics shares fall 36% in aftermarket trading after the biotech company said it did not meet its primary goal for testing ocular redness in the Phase 3 trial of the Tranquility drug. Braze climbed 13% in extended trading after giving a revenue forecast for fiscal 2022 that exceeded the average analyst estimate. The software company also provided a narrower than projected outlook for full-year adjusted loss. Aside from that, taking a look at the snapshot here this morning, S&P 500 futures are up 0.7% to 4588.50. Stocks Europe 600 up 0.9% to 471.50. Nikkei is up 2.1% to 28,517 and change. The Shanghai Composite is up 0.9% to 36,2513. The euro is up 0.2% to 1.1299. Brent futures are up 0.2% to 71.65 a barrel. Gold spot is up 0.3% to 1796.73 per ounce. And the US dollar index is down 0.2% to 96.36. Some overnight news out of Bloomberg. Anyone gearing up for bond yields to surge in 2022 should think again. A global glut of saved cash has the potential to restrain an increase in rates, even as the central banksters dial back their pandemic stimulus. ECB Governing Council member Peter Casimir says there is still a long way to go to reach monetary policy normalization following last week's confirmation of an exit from pandemic bond buying. European electricity prices surged to a fresh record as the region scrambled to keep the lights on in France, the region's second biggest market. Boris Johnson's government suggested there won't be new coronavirus restrictions imposed before Christmas, as ministers stressed the need to balance public health with protecting the UK economy. UK debt costs are rising at the fastest pace since the aftermath of the global financial crisis, a potential headache for Chancellor Rishi Sunak as he faces pressure to spend more to help businesses weather the impact of the Omicron variant. President Biden will send 500 million free coronavirus tests to Americans' homes beginning next month and dispatch the military to shore up overwhelmed hospitals as the U.S. confronts a resurgent scamdemic. Also, President Biden spent time on Friday with an aide who tested positive for a coronavirus infection 3 days later, but has so far tested negative himself, White House Press Secretary Jen Psaki said in a statement. The Omicron variant accounted for 73% of all sequenced COVID-19 cases in the United States, surging from around 3% last week, according to the latest federal estimates. Some of the world's biggest banks are paring back their LIBOR transition programs after collectively spending billions of dollars on the seismic shift away from the discredited rate. And also, the number of crypto tracking investment vehicles worldwide more than doubled to 80 from just 35 at the end of 2020, according to Bloomberg Intelligence data. Assets soared to $63 billion compared to $24 billion at the start of the year. Also, out of News Squawk, over to Asia, China influencer crackdown exposes a loophole used to hide wealth. Thailand halts quarantine-free entry as Omicron tops tourism. Chinese developer stocks jump most in a month, according to an Evergrande update. And Pakistan's Imran Khan concedes election loss in stronghold area. Back over to Europe. Casimir last week started long path to ECB policy normalization. Kitron surges 10% after buying EMS provider for DKK 600M. UK holds off pre-Christmas virus curbs with eye on economy. And Turkey to announce details of lira deposit support on Tuesday. And I think we're going to get into that here in just a little bit. As far as the U.S. event calendar today, pretty quiet on all fronts. 8:30 a.m. we get the third quarter account balance estimate of 205 billion down versus down 190.3 billion prior. So that's a quick rundown of the markets here this morning. Backing up to yesterday, World Economic Forum in the news as Davos is postponing for a second straight year. Yep. Pretty sad, and got to break out the fiddle for old Klaus Schwab and company at the Davos crowd. Can't have their little 400 jump jet junkets over there. So, members of the global business elite will no doubt be disappointed to learn that the World Economic Forum in Davos has been canceled for the second year, running due to the concerns tied to the global COVID scamdemic. And it's not worth pointing out because of all the emissions created by the private Air Force of PJs that travel to the remote alpine skiing village for the annual event. So the event, which had been scheduled to take place between January 17th and 21st of 2022, will instead be quote-unquote postponed, according to a statement released Monday morning by the World Economic Forum. Due to continued uncertainty over the Omicron variant, the World Economic Forum has been forced to rethink its plans, and it's now planned to host the meeting in early summer. Current pandemic conditions make it extremely difficult to deliver a global in-person meeting, it said. Despite the meeting's stringent health protocols, the transmissibility of Omicron and its impact on travel and mobility have made deferral necessary. Instead, the global thought leaders, political leaders, and business leaders, bunch of wonks, will gather for a scaled-back, all-online version of the speeches, talks, and forums that make up the bulk of the event, which is better known for its influential parties and backroom dealings, by the way. Last year's brouhaha was canceled because of the pandemic, then tentatively rescheduled to take place in Singapore over the summer, before ultimately being canceled because of the global scamdemic. The most recent annual meeting netted the Swiss economy around 80 million, or about 87 million in 2020, with businesses and hotels taking in some 63 million in revenues per their currency there. And there's the full statement. We'll bypass that. But, yep, break out the fiddles, shed a tear for Klaus Schwab and all the, CFR folks and various other elitists, or should I say parasites, who think themselves to be elite in this world. So, that being said, the Turkish lira is exploding higher after Erdogan's comments yesterday. This was updated periodically throughout the day as the lira has been tanking extraordinarily quickly, says having done nothing but insist on the continuation a religion-driven rate-cutting environment overnight, sending the lira above 18 to the US dollar. Turkish President Erdogan made another appearance this afternoon announcing extraordinary measures to bolster the Turkish lira, including the introduction of a new program that will, in his words, protect savings from fluctuations in the local currency. The government will make up for losses incurred by holders of lira deposits should the lira's declines against hard currencies exceed interest rates promised by banks, Erdogan said after chairing a cabinet meeting in Ankara. From now on, none of our citizens will need to switch their deposits from the Turkish lira to foreign currencies because of their concerns that the exchange rate fluctuations might wipe out gains from interest payments, Erdogan said. The measures are intended to mitigate retail investors' demand for dollars. While the fact that to do this he would need to print more money seems to have been ignored, the lira suddenly exploded higher in what appears to be nothing more than a well-engineered short squeeze for now. And mind you, this was yesterday. Let's see, this update came through around 1:15 Eastern yesterday. So that was the quick tick up that they're describing. Says this is one of the biggest bounces in the lira on record, larger at its peak that during the August 2018 crisis, and the biggest intraday bounce since 1994. And below is a summary from Bloomberg of other steps announced by Erdogan on Monday. Authorities will offer non-deliverable forwards to help exporters mitigate foreign exchange risks emanating from the elevated levels of volatility. Turkey has neither the intention nor the need to take the slightest step back from the free market economy and the foreign exchange regime, Erdogan said. Withholding tax for investments in lira notes issued by the government will be reduced to 0% from 10% currently. Government will match 30% of all contributions made by private sector workers to the optional pension system, up from the current level of 25%. The exporter-specific NDFs may backfire and create a bifurcated currency system, forcing demand for a black market dollar exchange, and of course we've seen this before, says we suggest not reading too much into this rip. How many times did the Venezuelan peso react before heading to hyperinflation? And yes, we probably don't have to look too far back other than what Maduro did down in Venezuela here, probably, 2-3 years ago, and watching their currency devalue into basically nothing. And mind you, what did they do? They sent their gold over to the old Bank of England and have been in dealings trying to get that back ever since. And per another update, it says, as expected, moments after the first circuit breaker was lifted, the furious selling returned, sending the Borsa Istanbul down 7.1% and triggering a second circuit breaker for the day. The local market collapse is an ominous signal because until Friday, stocks had generally offset the collapse in the lira, reaching all-time highs before the relationship suddenly snapped over the past 2 trading days. Meanwhile, in US dollar terms, Turkish stocks have continued to drift lower and are now back to levels last seen in 2004, confirming that the stock market is not a viable store of value during hyperinflation. So take note of that. If it can happen there, it can happen here. So you may not necessarily want to be in stocks as we watch our currency take a crap. So that is what's going on in Turkey at the moment. More to come here today, I'm sure. But I don't know. How many of you guys been paying attention to this little feud that old Pocahontas has whipped up against, the elitists and ever so rich Elon Musk. Well, if you've been paying attention, you note that Musk has been selling stocks left and right because he basically has uh, uh, a salary of $0, so all of his financials are tied up in stocks. And in order for him to pay for any sort of debts, he's been selling stocks. And as of late, he has sold no less than $11 billion worth of Tesla stock. Hence, we get the article. Elon Musk says he'll pay over $11 billion in taxes this year. Whoops, where's your argument now, Pocahontas? Says after heavy criticism from lawmakers, including Senator Karen Elizabeth Warren, Elon Musk was out last night on Twitter touting that we'll be paying more than $11 billion in taxes this year. The number could wind up being a record payment to the IRS, according to Bloomberg. And there we see Musk's statement via Twitter. Says, for those wondering, I will pay over $11 billion in taxes this year, Musk tweeted last night. The report claims that Musk could face a tax bill of more than $10 billion for 2021 if he decides to exercise all of his options due to expire next year. A lot of the scrutiny on Musk's taxes came after a ProPublica report in June said that Musk paid little income tax relative to his outsized wealth. Musk claims he has an effective tax rate of 53%. Says, recall, we wrote about Musk's original spat with Warren a couple of days ago, having taunted Bernie Sanders in November, tweeting that, I keep forgetting that you're still alive, after the socialist senator spewed his standard pay your fair share diatribe. Musk cranked up the progressive punishment amplifier with Warren, we noted. Never want to miss an opportunity for some abuse the rich populism, Warren tweeted in a nasty comment aimed directly at Musk after he won Time's Person of the Year. She barked, apparently with little or no concept of the scale of the Tesla CEO's share sales recently to meet his tax obligations. Let's change the rigged tax code so the Person of the Year will actually pay taxes and stop freeloading off everyone else. Musk replied, please don't call the manager on me. Senator Karen. So very fitting. And of course, that is old Pocahontas for you. And by the way, I believe she just tested positive for the COVIDs here as of late. So, wish her a speedy recovery. And nonetheless, still along the vein of the World Economic Forum folks, we've heard about this time and time again. That as part of this Build Back Better crap that is in governments, not just here in the United States, but in many of the West governments, you'll own nothing and be happy about it. And, we even heard from the Davos crowd that eating bugs is going to be a new thing, right? Well, it seems to be making itself manifest already. Europe certifies crickets, worms, and grasshoppers as edible food amid soaring food prices. So I ask you, who's winning this war at the moment, folks? What does it look like to you? Does it look like we're on the winning side, or are they still advancing regardless? It says across the world, households are experiencing an exponential rise in food inflation. This holiday season, from Brazil to China to European countries to the U.S., households will pay near record prices for food, which begs the question, are households able to afford traditional food, or will they resort to substitutes to save money? Now, you might be able to trade down on some things. Instead of the high-priced turkeys or steaks, you might consider something less expensive on that side of the dinner table. Kurt Covington, Senior Director of Institutional Credit at Ag America Lending, which lends money to farmers, told Bloomberg. But there's no escaping it. Everything on the holiday table is just going to be more expensive, Covington said. For example, working poor Americans have had trouble affording essential goods amid rapid inflation. A staggering 6.8% surge in consumer costs is the highest in 4 decades, making things like food unaffordable because wages haven't kept pace with inflation. The same is happening for households worldwide. Now, mind you, we've talked ad nauseum about this 6.8% and what it really would be if they want to try and compare this back to 1982, which at the time also included housing and rents and things of that nature, which would likely put our inflation at the moment north of 10 to 11%. So don't believe necessarily all the figures you read. Do some research to understand. It says global prices are surging for almost every major food group, according to Food Fright. Meat, dairy, cereals, oils, sugar, all of which are up. It says, with that in mind, households are likely to substitute popular holiday foods with low-cost items. There's even a chance that some might resort to eating bugs and worms. European member states certified house crickets, yellow mealworms, and grasshoppers as food fit to be sold at supermarkets. Sold at supermarkets? Can't people catch these on their own in their own yards? Why do we got to go to a store to have somebody put a package and some cellophane over it and buy the stupid stuff and then pay taxes on it on top of it? Good grief. Says the bugs will be sold in frozen, dried, and powdered forms and will be packed with nutrients and low cost, according to Bloomberg. Earlier this month, the World Economic Forum published 2 articles explaining how people must get used to eating bugs. Those who can no longer afford meat, such as ham or turkey and other traditional holiday foods, will come to find a new substitute. Bloomberg provides examples from across the world of how food inflation crushes holiday cheer. So in Brazil, Amazon fish replace pricey imports. Fatima Santos describes her family's planned Christmas Eve supper in 2021 in one word: lean. Neither cod nor turkey, traditional centerpieces in many Brazilian homes for the holidays, will make the cut this year, the 41-year-old unemployed hairdresser said while combing the shelves for deals in a Rio de Janeiro supermarket. Egg is a new steak in our home. Even rice and beans are super expensive, she said. That's hardly a seasonal specialty, but the staple dish might grace more holiday tables like hers as meat prices become increasingly hard to stomach. Says although the country is one of the world's largest producers of ag commodities, soaring demand abroad and a weak local currency are making exports more profitable, leaving less Brazilian grown food for Brazilians at home. Says at the same time, this year's extreme weather, the worst drought in a century, followed by an unprecedented frost, severely damaged the nation's crops, stoking inflation. Think tank Getulio Vargas Foundation calculates beef prices are up about 15% in the last year, while chicken costs have soared more than 24%. Grocery chain Zona Sul has been trying to stock its shelves with more local products so families can avoid the worst of the inflation. Traditional Norwegian cod is still available in the weeks leading up to Christmas, but the store is also pushing Amazon fish Piraruku for half the price. With sparkling wine imports delayed due to container shortages, the chain is discounting regional alternatives. As purchasing power diminishes, people are looking for secondary brands, said the chain's executive director, Pierangelo Lita. Priscilla Santana, a professional chef, usually sells rabanadas, a dessert resembling French toast, around the holidays. But she's had to boost prices this year by more than 10% on rising costs for bread, milk, and eggs, plus the gasoline required to even get to the store. Despite starting sales several weeks earlier this year and accepting both credit cards and company-issued meal tickets, she's still seeing lower demand. I expect to sell 20% less this year, and some of my clients had to give up the rabanadas to buy their lunch instead. So over to China, stockpiling sends costs soaring. So there's plenty of food to go around in the world's most populous country, the Ministry of Commerce insists. But that hasn't stopped Chinese households from stocking up, and in some cases, hoarding. Following a confusing advisory from the government in early November that encouraged people to restock essentials ahead of winter, stoking fears of travel restrictions, virus outbreaks, extreme weather, or worse. Usually, one family only needs to store 1 bag of flour, but now they're buying 2 or even 3 bags. Of course, prices will increase, said one shopkeeper who has been selling noodles, dumpling wrappers, and Chinese pancakes for almost 30 years. Speaking from behind his stall in a market in Beijing, he asked to only be identified by his family name, Zhao. The more families hoard flour, the higher prices will go. The 25 kilogram, or about 55-pound bags of flour he buys from his supplier are about 30% more expensive than a month ago, now costing more than 90 yuan, or about $14 US. But Zhao has raised his own selling price by less than 20%, even as the winter solstice, Dongji, nears, boosting demand for traditional delicacies like dumplings and noodles. My costs have risen, but I can't really increase prices or I'll lose customers, he said. Over to the UK, turkey farms pay up for labor. Says there isn't a product that we use on this farm that hasn't gone up, said Becky Howe, a third-generation farmer, as she watched workers guide a flock of turkeys to an open barn on the last day of slaughtering at the John Howe Turkey Farm outside Kent. That includes the cost of steel used to construct the barns, chopped straw for bedding, corn feed, gas, packing cartons, and even wax for the automated plucking line. The farm wasn't anticipating such inflationary pressures when it boosted the size of this year's flock by 25% and, for the first time ever, started rearing geese, too. The greatest headache has been finding enough workers during November and December, the farm's busiest time of the year. Most of its employees are foreigners who come to the country on temporary visa permits. The farm has boosted pay this year to retain staff. It has raised the prices of its turkeys by 8%, but its own costs have gone up more. The price increases hasn't covered everything, and we've had to absorb as much as we possibly could, Howe said. We don't want to pass on too much and scare people away from buying our turkeys. Worried about rising prices, plus a shortage of UK truck drivers that will only exacerbate the squeeze, grocers say some families in London started buying their Christmas turkeys as early as October this year. The demand for smaller birds is particularly high as virus fears temper optimism that extended families will be gathering again this year after a 2020 in lockdown. Over to Romania. Price out of the pig slaughter. In the Romanian countryside, the Orthodox celebration of St. Ignatius on December 20th has followed a traditional script for centuries. Buy a pig from a trusted farmer, slit its throat, burn the skin, and clean the carcass with help from friends and family at the break of dawn. Every part of the animal, from the legs to the fat to the intestines, are then transformed into dozens of dishes to feed a household's extended family at Christmas, New Year's, and every meal in between. At least, that used to be the custom. This year, more families will just snag some supermarket sausages on their way home from work and call it a day, said Adi Rusu, a 40-year-old farmer from the village of Posta Kalnau. Rusu's family has been growing pigs for 40 years, but with feed and electricity costs through the roof, risks of a deadly swine flu outbreak, and customers increasingly opting for easier options, his family is talking about whether it's even worth the hassle. It's hard for neighbors to justify paying as much as 1,500 Romanian lei, or about 340 US, for a local pig, a 50% hike over the last 4 to 5 years. At the same time, COVID travel restrictions that keep many working Romanians abroad mean downsized dinners, and little incentive to cook enough pork to eat for at least 7 straight days. Says it's becoming obvious we can't eat 3 times more than in a regular week at Christmas, said Mariora Melexia, the director of meat company M&R and Lacey. You know, we can always find fresh meat on the shelves. Rusu only had 6 pigs an offer this year, about a fifth of what he'd normally sell, after many of the piglets died at birth, but he decided supplementing with more piglets from commercial farms to turn a profit of only 400 lei, or about $90 a piece. Just didn't make economic sense this year. Would-be customers are not buying from someone else, they're going to the supermarket, said Rusu, who picked up animal farming from his father. Those who know how to prepare it are slowly passing away, and the young are not interested in learning. And back to the U.S. here, says cookie season takes a hit. Americans eating more butter than ever before will find it costs more than their waistline this holiday season. Once vilified for saturated fat, butter has become popular again as shoppers embrace high-fat diets, driving per capita consumption to 6.3 pounds in 2020, the highest in data going back to the Ford presidency. Butter consumption typically peaks in the fourth quarter thanks to all the holiday cookies, mashed potatoes, and other full-flavored traditions that grace the table. It's also soaring in price. Spot wholesale prices for grade AA butter are up about 40% from this time last year to more than $2 a pound. There's plenty of milk to make it, but packing and shipping have been a challenge amid widespread labor and materials shortages. Grassland Dairy Products in Greenwood, Wisconsin recently raised its prices for supermarkets for the first time in 4 years. President Trevor Wuthrich cited rising cardboard expenses, trucking issues, and its own decision to hike hourly wages in September in order to retain trained employees. Some households make the switch to vegetable oil spreads, like margarine, to cut costs, though those are rising in price too. Dina Simarusti, owner of newly opened Sugar Moon Bakery in Chicago, just paid 40 cents per pound more than usual for butter in early December. For her, subbing it out isn't an option. It's an important ingredient for many of her home-style pastries, including scones, cookies, and cakes. It's just not butter, she said. Even my produce prices have gone up significantly since I opened, said 36-year-old Simarusti, whose storefront debuted in September. Unless I raise my prices, I'm obviously losing money. For now, she's holding pat. I was just going to wait it out, she said, clad in a green apron and jeans, weighing pound blocks of butter before dumping them into a large steel mixer for molasses cookies. I just try to keep it affordable. Simply put, inflation increases food insecurity that will dramatically reshape traditional holiday dishes. Some may resort to eating bugs and worms this year. And to that I say no. I think we can probably grid out the increase, at least for the foreseeable future, but what it should be doing is highlighting the fact that we don't need centralized food. We should be grooming our own local places to try and get this stuff and partnering up with local farms, local growers, things of that nature, and kind of, if you will, redefining what our supply chains look like locally. We don't necessarily have to have a lot of this stuff trucked clear across the country just because, hey, that's what we're used to. And so it's going to take effort on our parts to help make that happen locally. All right, that being said, we'll get out of bugs here for a bit. Severe weather wrecks top Southeast Asian port. And amid all of the supply chain issues just described, and of course talking quite a bit about the LA Long Beach ports and that here over the last several weeks, we get this. Says Malaysia's worst flash flooding in years left 200 people dead, 440,000 displaced, and one of the largest shipping ports in the world disrupted over the weekend. Operations at Malaysia's Port Klang, Southeast Asia's second largest, handling more than 13 million 20-foot equivalence units per year, has delayed delivery and vessel berthing due to damaged infrastructure at the port. According to the authority, heavy rainfall and flash floods have severely affected operations at Port Klang's North Port, West Port, and South Port terminals. The flooding has also hit warehouses, empty container depots, and access roads. In addition, many port and logistics workers aren't able to get to work because roadways are cut off. Says the authority warned that cargo movement is expected to be severely affected and its operations will be delayed at least several days. Vessel berthing will also be delayed due to the foul weather, which has already created a backlog of vessels at the outer anchorage, and more ships are on the way. And so for reference, on the map here, I see Thailand, Laos, Vietnam, Cambodia, and you follow this little peninsula all the way down here into Malaysia. And here we see Port Klang, again citing the fact that they clear about 13 million 20-foot TEUs on a given year. I'd say it's pretty busy. Says, in the meantime, Port Klang Authority is working with local partners to make the best of the limited available resources. It is prioritizing movement of perishables and essential items like medical supplies, according to the Maritime Executive. Floodwaters in the Klang Valley receded Sunday. Malaysian officials called the storm a once-in-a-100-year event. There's no word on when the port will reopen. The shuttering of the port will continue to pressure global supply chains. Of course it will, because everything is interconnected. We talked quite a bit about this yesterday and some of the graphics net that we have recently put up over the last couple of shows, actually, talking just about how fragile supply chains really are. Thinking back to the Jim Rickards piece yesterday from the Daily Reckoning and even a graphic on chips and things of that nature from Friday. So, that being said, we flash over to they're totally confused. Biden's vaccine mandate chaos leaves employers with whiplash. And of course, if you recall here, there had been a stay from the Fifth Circuit Court of Appeals on some of these mandates, and many different groups attacking this in all different directions. But then this past weekend, we saw the Sixth Circuit kind of put the kibosh on that, and now supposedly it's back on, but no word whether or not the January 4th business is still in play or not. So it's kind of leaving companies, corporations, and the like kind of confused, shall we say. The Biden administration's attempt to force millions of American workers to either get jabbed or risk losing their jobs has backfired spectacularly. On Monday, the New York Times published what to many probably sounded like scathing criticism coming from the notoriously pro-Dem paper. President Biden's attempt to use OSHA to try and force some 84 million workers to get vaccinated has left said employers with whiplash. They're totally confused. A quote in the headline screamed. And continues here. Says just a few weeks ago, the administration was charging ahead, but its momentum has been decidedly crippled, especially now that the very definition of fully vaccinated has been thrown into question. And by the way, if you missed the floating definitions and the continual moving of the goalposts, we talked quite a bit about that on Saturday night's show. The marching orders from the Biden administration in November had seemed clear. Large employers were to get their workers fully vaccinated by early next year or make sure the workers were tested weekly. But a little over a month later, the Labor Department's vaccine rule has been swept into confusion and uncertainty by legal battles, shifting deadlines, and rising COVID case counts that throw the very definition of fully vaccinated into question. The spread of the highly transmissible Omicron variant has seemingly bolstered the government's argument, at the heart of its legal battle over the rule, that the virus remains a grave threat to workers, but the recent surge in cases has raised the issue of whether the government will take its requirements further, even as the original rule remains contentious, and ask employers to mandate booster shots too. The country's testing capacity has also been strained, according to concerns that companies will be unable to meet the rules' testing requirements. Even the lawyers don't know what to do. Says my clients are totally confused, as quite frankly am I, said Aaron McLaughlin, a labor and employment lawyer at Buchanan, Ingersoll, and Rooney, he said on Saturday. My sense is that there are a lot of employers scrambling to try and put their mandate programs in place. Says with the issue still being viciously contested in the courts, the legal reality of the situation is that the order is still pending. So in effect, the Biden admin has been stymied. With so much likely riding on a decision from the nation's highest court, how much longer until this becomes another cudgel used by the progressive left to push their court-packing agenda, which is not dead, since President Biden and Kamala Harris mostly refuse to talk about it publicly. Says, no company has been spared the whirlwind of changes in the last week, set off by the spike in COVID cases that have in some instances cut into their workforces. Then on Friday, an appeals court lifted the legal block on the vaccine rule, though appeals to the ruling were immediately filed, leaving the rule's legal status up in the air. On Saturday, hours after the appeals court ruling, the Labor Department's OSHA urged employers to start working to get in compliance. But also, OSHA also gave employers some leeway, pushing back full enforcement of the rule until February, recognizing that for all its best intentions, the rollout of the rule has been muddled. For companies struggling to meet OSHA's standards because of testing shortages, the Labor Department said Sunday that it would consider refraining from enforcement if the employer has shown a good faith effort to comply. The fact that many states have cities, most notably New York City, have rolled out their own rules for enforcement adds another layer of complexity to the whole mess. Adding a layer of confusion, many states and cities have created their own vaccine rules, some more stringent than the federal government's, as in New York City, where an option to test out of vaccine requirements isn't allowed, while some, like Florida, have sought to undermine OSHA's rule. There's also the question of whether companies will eventually be required to mandate boosters, which would require accommodating the 6-month delay between the second and third shots. And as far as Wall Street is concerned, their current state of vaccine enforcement is we're not going to talk about it. JP Morgan Chase, whose decision to require vaccines is complicated by its sprawling retail operations across the United States, declined to comment on how the court's most recent decision, along with the recent spike in cases, affects any plans to mandate vaccines. But the bank on Friday told its American employees who do not work in bank branches that each group should assess who needs to come into the office, work priorities, and who should revert to working from home on a more regular basis over the next few weeks. It says at this point, opponents of the rule, which includes the National Retail Federation, a trade group, haven't changed their positions despite the quote-unquote rise of Omicron, which, keep in mind, has only been confirmed in a tiny fraction of overall new cases. Even the spread of Omicron hasn't changed the position of some of the vaccine rule's most ardent opponents. The National Retail Federation, one of the trade groups challenging the admin's vaccine rule, is among those that have filed a petition with the Supreme Court. The group is in favor of vaccinations but has pushed for companies to get more time to carry out mandates. Still, even as it fights the administration's rule, the Federation is also holding twice-weekly calls with members to compare notes on how to carry it out. There's no question that the increased number of variants like Omicron certainly don't make it less dangerous, said Stephanie Martz, the group's chief administrative officer and general counsel. The legitimate remaining question is this inherent to the workplace? Then, of course, there's the booster question. And employers face yet another uncertainty. Should they mandate boosters, and will they be required to? When will all of this insanity and confusion end? Good question. I don't think there is a plan for it to. I think that's exactly what they're pushing for. Mass confusion. And of course, obviously no conformity. They're going to have people push against this and subvert law, which lawlessness, all that stuff is coming to play. Mandates are not law. There's nothing in legislation that says thou shalt. We don't take decrees from on high. We do not have a king in this country. So for all intents and purposes, this is void ab initio. Null and void from the start. Period. And it's time we the people wake up, tell our employees to stick it where the sun does not shine. Aside from that, California is rewarding Deadbeats once again with $80,000 in cash giveaway to delinquent homeowners. And I meant to go grab a meme for this one because here's what comes to mind. You ever think of the meme, and I'm sure many of you guys have probably seen this, the one about the government and your broken leg? You break your leg, or the government breaks your leg. You go to the hospital, and then the government gives you crutches or a wheelchair and says, thank the government for helping your cause. This is exactly that, except on a grander scale. First, the government wheels out a scamdemic, right? Then they force your businesses to close. And then, of course, knowing that you have no source of income, force you to more or less default on your loans. And then they expect you to come back around and say, thank them for the, oh, here's the 80 grand cash giveaway we're going to give you to help you because of what's happened. It's the same thing. Again, just on a grander scale. California homeowners who are behind on their mortgage payments due to the scamdemic or whatever are about to receive up to 80 grand per household in the form of a direct payment to mortgage servicers. The $1 billion program funded by taxpayers, as opposed to making homeowners tap into their massive equity gained in their homes while they weren't making payments, was approved by the U.S. Department of the Treasury and will apply to as many as 40,000 struggling homeowners, according to a statement from Newsom's office. It says we are committed to supporting those hit hardest by the scamdemic, and that includes homeowners who have fallen behind on their housing payments. It reads, no one should have to live in fear of losing the roof over their head. So we're stepping up to support struggling homeowners to get them the resources they need to cover past mortgage payments. See that? Thank the government for providing them the resources for the scenario that they themselves created. Newsom noted that renters and landlords had already received assistance. Now, with our California Mortgage Relief Program, we are extending that relief to homeowners, he said. The funding, which is allocated through the Federal American Rescue Plan Act's Homeowner Assistance Fund, is provided as a one-time grant that qualified homeowners will not be required to repay. It's only if you're qualified, see? And what do you want to bet, folks, that part of those qualifiers to receive said assistance, I'm going to speculate here, but I'm going to guess that, hey, you probably have to be jabbed. What do you want to bet? Anyone? Any takers on that? Anyone want to throw down a bet here? $5? Anyone? Says Californians at or below 100% of the country's area median income who own a single-family home, condo, or manufactured home, and who faced pandemic-related hardships after January 21st, 2020, may be eligible for the program, according to the Sacramento Bee. It says, will those who didn't overcommit themselves in the first place receive tax credits? Once again, moral hazard, FTW. So yes, absolutely. Break your legs, give you the crutches, and expect a thanks. So outside of some financial news here today, but still along the lines of some of the COVID shenanigans out there, we get this out of the New York Post. It says Biden's launching COVID test sites to ease New York City lines, 1,000 troops to fight Omicron. Think of that here. Are we dealing with a pandemic, or are we dealing with a case-demic? And there's some articles out here even this morning challenging that assertion as well on whether or not the tests are indeed the purveyor of the fear-mongering that's going on. I think many of you guys probably already know the answer to that, but more importantly to this headline, 1,000 troops to fight Omicron. Why are we deploying troops across the country in this regard? Are we at war? Did Posse Comitatus somehow just get swept under the rug? I don't know. Just a question I have. But the Biden admin is launching federally run COVID-19 testing sites in New York City and other areas, overwhelmed by demand as the Omicron variant causes record numbers of new coronavirus cases. Cases, folks. Emphasize cases. The feds also are mobilizing 1,000 military members to help overwhelmed hospitals and setting up a website to distribute via mail 500 million free at-home rapid tests. 500 million to give you false positives. Oh, and that you're asymptomatic. President Biden will announce the steps at 2:30 p.m. speech Tuesday as he seeks to calm mounting panic about the more contagious variant that's caused many breakthrough infections, even among people who are vaccinated. Now, wait a minute. Breakthrough? I thought this was a scamdemic now of the unjabbed. Now you're telling me that people like Liz Warren, who's been jabbed, like Mr. Mad Money himself over on CNBC, who has been jabbed recently, purportedly stated that he's got the positive tests, and many others. Cory Booker, I believe, is another one that comes to mind. Seems that their narrative seems to be falling short here. The Resident will announce that the federal government will set up new federal testing sites around the country. The first of these will be set up in New York City before Christmas, a senior administration official told reporters. We will actually have several of those. The first several open in New York City before the Christmas holidays, and we're going to continue to add sites based on where states and communities have capacity constraints and where the state and local public health officials request our assistance. What were those 9 worst words that Reagan always liked to mention? Hi, I'm from the government, and I'm here to help. Run, run. So, yes, apparently Biden's going to talk about this here today. Says it's not immediately clear where in New York City the sites will be located. Since last week, New Yorkers have had to stand in line for hours to wait for a free city-provided coronavirus test. The beleaguered test sites at points turned away people who spent long stretches in line for documentation of a negative test for travel, to attend events, or get peace of mind before seeing family. Why are people bothering to go get tested? Is this normal, folks? Did we ever do this before? Just because the media whips us into a frenzy about some scam-demic known as coronavirus now? Did we ever do that for the flu? Did we go get tested? Did we ever go get tested for any other thing in the past? Why now? Why are people buying into this garbage? Snap out of it, folks. You're in a trance. Retailers such as CVS Pharmacy are running out of rapid tests at some locations in response to a surge in demand. The new federal rapid test distribution website will be set up in January. The government will make no attempt to track the results, the official said. Yeah, right. It says also in January, a previously announced Biden rule, not law, but rule, will take effect requiring private insurance companies to reimburse policyholders for rapid tests. Another 50 million rapid tests are in the process of being shipped by the federal government to clinics for free distribution. And here we see some of said products. Binax now, I guess. I don't know. I've never looked at this stuff, nor will I. I have no intention of ever walking into a CVS or a Walgreens or any other pharmaceutical pusher to try and grab a test to tell me that I'm sick. I know when I'm sick. I don't need a test to tell me. I don't even care whether or not if this has been the Wu flu, regular flu, upside down flu, whatever. Doesn't matter. You know how to combat that. The military members, meanwhile, will be deployed to hospitals to prevent them from being overwhelmed if nurses and doctors are sickened by Omicron. How do they know? Maybe it's a Delta. How do they know? The Resident is directing Defense Secretary Lloyd Austin to mobilize 1,000 members of our military. These are doctors, nurses, medics, and other military medical personnel to deploy to overburden hospitals in January and February, the federal official said. God willing, we will not need all those servicemen and women, but if we do, they are ready and they are mobilized. Don't invoke God when you're pushing this satanic BS. Sick people, I tell you. Anyway, we'll break from that, head over to this, as bill would give New York governor authority to indefinitely detain cases or suspected cases of contagious disease. Still in New York. Is Hochul any better than Cuomo that they got out of there at this point for anybody that's up in New York by chance? Any of you guys? Any thoughts? Seems to me that Hochul is what's the old song? Meet the new boss, same as the old boss. Kind of seems that way. And by the way, as I get to the end of this, remind me here, this will circle back to Saturday night's discussion as well. Had an article in that will absolutely kill this in its tracks right away. And let's see here. I'll pull that off on the side here. Yeah, there we go. Got it up. All right, so breaking this guy down. It says, what could possibly go wrong? It says, that's right. What could possibly go wrong with legislation that would, if passed into law, grant the far-left governor of New York, or any government official or entity, the unilateral authority to detain anyone indefinitely, even suspected of posing a significant threat to public health? No way could that be abused. No, we've never seen this play out in history, have we? Greg Price tweet says it hasn't gotten nearly enough attention that New York is considering a bill that would literally give the state the authority to detain people it considers quote unquote potentially dangerous to the public health. And for those asking, that's New York State Assembly Bill A416. Look it up, newyorksenate.gov. Bill A416. And of course, you can read that on the New York State Senate website. Here's a relevant section, emphasis mine. It says, upon determining by clear and convincing evidence that the health of others is or may be endangered by a case, contact, or carrier, or suspected case, contact, or carrier of a contagious disease that, in the opinion of the governor, after consultation with the commissioner, may pose an imminent and significant threat to the public health, resulting in severe morbidity or high mortality, the governor of his or her delegee, whatever, including but not limited to the commissioner or heads of local health departments, may order the removal and or detention of such a person or of a group of such persons by issuing a single order, identifying such persons either by name or by a reasonably specific description of the individuals or group being detained. Such person or group of persons shall be detained by a medical facility or other appropriate facility or premises designated by the governor or his delegee. In addition, reported the National Pulse on Monday, the bill would, quote, require an individual who has been exposed to or infected by a contagious disease to complete an appropriate prescribed course of treatment, preventative medication, or vaccination, end quote, essentially giving the government the right to detain anyone they want and forcibly vaccinate them. What's next? COVID concentration camps? COVID Gestapo? Hyperbolic language? Sure, permanent detention facilities and those charged with dumping people in them at the whim of the government would never be labeled as such. To paraphrase Hillary, what difference does it make what we call them? And again, highlighting the bill here. Says, moreover, tell me, far-left New York Governor Kathy Hochul might not be tempted to use such power out of spite to punish political enemies. And I'll tell you that you need to start paying a bit more attention to her goings-on, or those of Oregon Governor Kate Brown, Michigan Governor Gretchen Whitmer, or any other Dem on a power trip. Biden was last seen furiously nodding in approval. Says, while the proposal suggests that no individual or group can be held for more than 60 days, that's 2 months, the language allows for court orders to waive the maximum detention time. And after 60 days, the court is allowed an additional 90 days to consider detention, a cycle that can last indefinitely per the opinion of the department. Opinion. Not facts, but their opinion. The New York General Assembly will reportedly vote on the bill in the legislative session beginning January 5th, 2022, according to the National Pulse. Here out of anonymous UK citizen, New York Senate and Assembly set to vote on Bill A416 that would allow the removal and detention of cases, contacts, and carriers who are or may be a danger to public health on an indefinite basis, based on opinion. Incidentally, COVID-19 isn't specifically mentioned, suggesting anyone could be detained and held in isolation until deemed to be non-contagious from anything. What, like HIV, AIDS, flu season? The list could go on and on. The only thing contagious here is the left's hell-bent desire to control all aspects of our lives. So, good piece out of Red State here highlighting what is coming. If you are in New York, folks, share this far and wide, this article. Matter of fact, I'm going to dump it out there so that you guys can get it out there in front of them, let them know what's going on, and raise holy hell about it. Get a hold of your various state legislators and tell them to pound sand. And why do I say this is going to be overturned? Matter of fact, before they even think about passing this, people ought to be writing up the litigation, getting the cases ready to file on a drop of a hat. On Saturday, we talked about this out of the Constitution Center. On this day, this being on the 18th now, the Supreme Court issues the Koromatsu decision. For those that were with me, remember the read-through on that. But what is Koromatsu? In effect, it was the illegal detention of the Japanese at the end of World War II because of, well, the fact it was a national security incident, and they were afraid. And eventually the whole thing was overturned, albeit 75 years later. This went into effect back in 1948 and wasn't overturned until 2018. Whatever the math is on it, it was right around 74, 75 years. But Koromatsu decision is going to come to play and bite this, and I sincerely hope that you New Yorkers have that in your back pocket, use it as a reference to combat this BS. Anyway, a little fired up over that one here this morning. Off to PJ Media here, says, God bless Joe Manchin. And of course, I think he's done a great service in killing the Build Back Better $1 trillion boondoggle that it is. And of course, the Dems' heads are exploding. Plenty of gnashing of teeth. Says, in Judaism, as in other faith traditions, we are enjoined to thank God for miracles and to especially pray for blessings upon those who have the courage to do holy work in this world. Rabbona Shel Olam, Master of the Universe, we thank you for inspiring the heart of Senator Joseph Manchin III to stand up for your ethics and will be rejecting the proposed BBB spending fiasco. We ask your blessings upon Senator Manchin, upon his family and friends, and upon all the people in West Virginia who place this courageous man in public office. May Senator Manchin remain steadfast in the courage he has shown in acting to protect this nation from the forces that seek to destroy our foundation, and may he be rewarded with good health and prosperity now and throughout his life. Holy One, we ask that you keep Senator Manchin and his family safe and healthy in these turbulent times. May you keep him and his loved ones protected from all forms and sources of evil, and always protect them as Senator Manchin continues to work in your name for the people of his state and our nation. Thank you, God, for placing in our Congress a man who seeks peace and prosperity for all the people of the United States of America over a value of blind partisanship. May you continue to bless our nation with representatives filled with strength and wisdom, with courageous leaders of holy principles, and bring us all safely into a time of good health, peace, and prosperity for all American citizens and the world. And together we say, Amen. So, interesting piece there. Again, I'm sure Bette Midler's head has since exploded, and I believe perhaps maybe you guys have seen that she went on some sort of diatribe here recently, blasting West Virginians as a bunch of beatnik hillbillies and everything else under the sun. Just shows how disconnected these idiots are. Out of Red State, or Resist the Mainstream, rather. Prosecution focuses on 8 key points in closing arguments of the Ghislaine Maxwell trial. Apparently this is winding down far quicker than anticipated. So it all comes down to this. On Monday at the federal courthouse in Lower Manhattan, the prosecution and defense in the Ghislaine Maxwell sex trafficking trial each gave their closing arguments. The respective cases closed weeks earlier than expected with far fewer witnesses than had been planned for. Over 4 hours, each side tried to convince the jury they had done enough. Assistant U.S. Attorney Allison Moe delivered arguments for the government. She had a slow and steady rhythm, methodical if not moving. Her closing broke down to 8 reasons why you know Maxwell is guilty, the you in this case being the jury. The first reason offered was that Jeffrey Epstein and Ghislaine Maxwell were a team. They were partners and lovers. This is why, Moe confirmed, the government had shown a long series of photos of the pair over a stretch of time, with different hairstyles, often in an embrace. Maxwell was painted not as an employee who had a brief romantic relationship with Epstein, but as a life partner, the lady of the house, and a co-conspirator. Second up for Moe was an argument that Maxwell used the same playbook over and over, with multiple young girls. This included the creepy detail from 2 accusers that Maxwell had begun her grooming by teaching them how to massage his bare feet. The accusers who testified all described some similar experiences. Maxwell, Moe argued, had a system and was sophisticated, posh, big sister who set up the victims for Epstein. Reasons 3, 4, and 5 why Moe argued the jury knows Maxwell is guilty was the testimony of accusers Jane, Annie Farmer, and Carolyn, respectively. Curiously, the witness who went by Kate was not listed, perhaps because the alleged sex with her happened when she was of age. Each of these accusers, including Kate, described Maxwell as not only knowing about their abuse, but helping to facilitate it, and in some cases even participating in it. The sixth reason cited by the government was the infamous black address book put into evidence. This book allegedly contained names and numbers of myriad of women and girls attached to Epstein, as well as names of several prominent and wealthy figures, most of whom were never mentioned in the trial. Seventh, Moe argued that Epstein had given Maxwell a lot of money over the years, in excess of $30 million. Clearly, Moe argued, this was payment for her complicity and silence. The eighth and final reason given was the timeline, a timeline Moe suggested that places Maxwell in the vicinity of the abuse. Throughout the prosecution's summation, Maxwell was still staring kind of far away in her light sweater and slightly unkempt hair. Her eyes were set on something in the courtroom, but just what that wasn't clear. Perhaps her future. The defense closing was given by Laura Menninger, who opened by saying, Ghislaine Maxwell is an innocent woman wrongfully accused of crimes she did not commit. It essentially focused on 2 arguments. First, that the memories of the witness against Maxwell have changed over time and are questionable. And second, that the government has not proven its case with sufficient evidence that she was involved in any trafficking. For example, Carolyn gave a clear-cut story about the abuse she received at the hands of Epstein in 2008 that did not mention Maxwell at all. It was the case with almost all of the witnesses that Maxwell came to play a larger role in their accounts over time, especially once the FBI launched its investigation into her. Another example was Jane, who said she wasn't sure if she had ever been alone with Epstein and Maxwell. There were many examples, but in fairness, these are events that took place long ago. So, quick little quip out of an article taken from the Daily Wire. More to come, I'm sure. Who knows how long it'll take for said jury to deliberate and what the ruling will be. Frankly, I don't think any one of you guys, and maybe you'll agree, that we should really expect any true justice out of this. However, not lost on anything. I think that perhaps the second trial coming up with Ghislaine is probably going to be more interesting to watch. And that one, I believe, starts up in January. Was to start about 2 weeks after the wrap-up of the anticipated length of this case. But I think that one with her and Ms. Jeffrey and everything else, that one's probably going to be the barn burner to watch. So aside from that on the morning, last but not least, says fiery governor candidate picks up on DeSantis' joke, says he'll bus PA's illegals into Biden's Delaware. And perhaps maybe you guys have seen that DeSantis is wanting to ship the illegals up to Martha's Vineyard, Delaware, and everywhere else, just so long as they're not in his state, because at this point the government is illegally trafficking folks and dumping them by the dark of night into many of our communities. Says in his new budget proposal, Republican Florida Governor Ron DeSantis allocated millions of dollars to remove illegal aliens from his state. Now, another gubernatorial candidate wants to take a page out of the DeSantis book. According to Breitbart, Pennsylvania governor candidate Lou Barletta said he is also tired of the federal government letting illegal immigrants into the country and then forcing the problem onto individual states. Says we're not going to be accepting illegal aliens from the border, said Barletta, a former Republican U.S. representative and former mayor of the East Central Pennsylvania city of Hazleton. They're shutting down businesses, making you take a vaccine that you don't want, putting masks on your kids all day long, and yet they're letting people come in from the border and shipping them to Pennsylvania and other states with no idea what their health conditions are. That all comes to an end, if he is elected. The budget DeSantis is proposing in Florida, dubbed the Freedom First budget, features various measures to deal with illegal immigration, including a still undefined plan to relocate illegal aliens from within the Sunshine State. The Freedom First budget includes $8 million to implement a program to assist the state's efforts to protect against harms resulting from illegal immigration, and may include the transport of unauthorized aliens located within the state to other states within the United States of America or the District of Columbia, a summary of the proposal stated. It says at a Jacksonville, Florida news conference to introduce the budget, DeSantis announced Florida would not do business with contractors that are, quote, knowingly and recklessly facilitating bringing people here into our state illegally, end quote. Other steps to combat illegal immigration would include the state taking a firmer line on Florida jurisdictions with sanctuary city policies to harbor illegal aliens, and beefing up the state's e-verify enforcement to make sure those hired in Florida have a right to work in the United States, DeSantis said. He also said the proposed budget includes an allocation of $8 million for us to be able to transport people here illegally out of the state of Florida. I said it's somewhat tongue-in-cheek, but it is true. If you sent illegals to Delaware or Martha's Vineyard or some of these places, that border would be secure the next day, DeSantis said. And in an interview with Breitbart on Saturday, Barletta said he would take similar action if he were elected governor in Pennsylvania. Governor DeSantis is doing a great job in Florida. Yes, I would take the same steps that DeSantis did, he told Breitbart. He pointed out that Delaware, where Biden frequently spends weekends away from the White House, shares a border with Pennsylvania. Pennsylvania is a lot closer to Delaware, so busing those folks to Delaware will cost us a lot less than it's costing DeSantis to ship people from Florida, he said, chuckling. Says, it's not a long ride from Philadelphia to Wilmington. That's exactly what we have to do. This plan may sound extreme, and given the realities of federalism and the fact that a state's government power ends at its own borders, is probably legally dubious. But it's a sign of the desperation being raised by Biden's border policies in interior states. And if bad PR and tanking approval ratings are not enough to wake him up, maybe the prospect, however unlikely, of governors shipping illegals to his home state might make the resident realize the problem. If Biden himself or the state he calls home were forced to experience the difficulties this influx of illegal immigration creates, he might just take action to solve the problem. I don't know, I might wager a bet on that one, I suppose, but I digress. Says the growing disconnect between politicians and their constituents is a major problem in America. Elected officials are supposed to represent the people, not tower over them from their proverbial castles. And as Biden tries to force his immigration failures onto unsuspecting states, ideas like these from DeSantis and Barletta, however extreme, may be exactly what the country needs. Oh, I got a good idea too. Why don't we shut down these NGOs that are making this happen? Why don't we go after like what Trump did and force these people to stay below the border in Mexico? Somehow Trump seemed to have a handle on this, but all of a sudden you get this joker in here, this resident in chief, and he's totally clueless. And of course, the border czar Kamala, well, she's out to lunch. No clue on what she does. But nonetheless, it looks like people have had enough. And that's where we'll leave it here this morning on the broadcast. As always, appreciate you guys tuning in. Thank you to all the folks on Foxhole, over on YouTube here this morning, over on D Live, Twitch, and everywhere else that join in here this morning, and also over on the Tiger Network. Appreciate you guys tuning in. We'll be back here tomorrow for a Wednesday edition. And take care. God bless everybody. We'll see you.